Hello, fellow adventurer. Welcome back to the Reparenting Podcast. Today, we're continuing part 2 of Finding Your Tribe. This episode is called Pull Up a Seat, Find Your People. It may sound strange, but I owe many of my deepest adult relationships to playing board games with strangers, my best friend, my husband, and the community I now think of as my neighborhood tribe. All of those relationships began the same way. Someone made space at a table and said, "Pull up a seat." But this story really begins with a simple question. How do we actually build meaningful connections as adults? How do we get better at surrounding ourselves with our people? Especially if we've moved away from our original tribe, or if our past experiences made relationships feel complicated. Why should we bother trying to find our people? Well, as I shared in part 1 of this series, good quality relationships are strongly linked to health and longevity. Another thing that I've learned through my reparenting journey is that belonging is a fundamental human need. For most of human history, our survival depended on the strength of our tribe. Social connection, whether through friendship or family, is also one of the deepest sources of meaning in life. There's a saying I like: the best time to make friends is before you need them. I would also argue the best time is today. So pull up a seat and stick around. I want to share with you the path that helped me slowly build my own tribe, a pattern I eventually noticed in my life. The 4 R's. I believe these 4 practices can help anyone on a similar search for greater connection. Before we go further, let's take a small detour into the science. In their book, What Happened to You?, Oprah Winfrey and neuroscientist Bruce Perry explain that our brains are constantly seeking regulation and reward. And one of the most powerful forms of reward is relational. Positive interactions with other people can regulate our nervous system. When we lack connection with people who care about us, people who spend time with us and support us, it becomes much harder to move away from other forms of regulation. Things like alcohol, drugs, comfort food, or escaping into screens. Those things can soothe us temporarily, but they don't meet deeper needs like belonging and being loved. What I find interesting is that research today suggests there's a lot more of us who are missing out on the social rewards of close friends than previous generations. The American Survey Center, for example, found something striking about social circles in the United States. In 1990, about 3 out of every 100 Americans reported having no close friends. By 2021, that number was closer to 1 in 10 adults. In other words, over the last 30 years, about 4 times as many people in America report having 0 close friends. So, if you sometimes feel like you don't have enough people in your tribe, you're really not alone in that feeling. There are many reasons why we might need to grow our social connections. more of us move away from where we grew up for work, for school, for love, or simply because we can't afford to stay. I've actually moved more than 10 times since I turned 21. So I know what it feels like to land somewhere new and suddenly realize you need to build a local tribe from scratch. And at the same time, technology and social media competes heavily for our attention. We see ads everywhere trying to capture our focus, but we don't see many reminders to call mom or check in on a friend. And while search engines can answer questions, they can't replace the powerful effect of sitting beside someone who cares about you. So, if connection is one of the most powerful ways to regulate ourselves, the next question becomes, how do we create those connections? After one very big move in particular, I found myself feeling deeply isolated. I had moved over 500 kilometers, or 350 miles, from where I grew up, for love. I had one friend in the city, my romantic partner, and I realized that wasn't enough. My therapist, who I continued seeing online, helped a lot, but therapy alone can't replace community. Around that time, I remembered something from my recent studies in early childhood education. I had learned something that helped answer the question, how can we create stronger social connections? We talked about how play helps children form relationships. In the world of child development, we often say play is the work of the child because it is so fundamental to their growth, learning, and development. Through play, children learn emotional regulation, communication, and cooperation. Play also helps them process feelings, enter a flow state, and connect with others. And although my studies were about child development, I had a strong suspicion it might work for my adult self and inner child too. I wondered if play could offer me a shortcut to bonding with others. And as I found out, play isn't just a superpower for regulating children. It can help all of us to get calmer, more focused, and back into balance too. And it's from this grounded state where relationships can really flourish. Years earlier, I had seen something like this. While dating a former boyfriend, his friends had a tradition of gathering regularly to play board games. One year, they invited us for a Thanksgiving board game party. There was turkey, mashed potatoes, and gravy, but no family drama. Just laughter, strategy, and friendly competition. It felt like witnessing a modern tribe in action. That memory stayed with me. So, when loneliness started creeping in after my move, I decided to find a board game group of my own. I found one advertised online that met weekly, in person, a short distance from where I lived. I didn't know anyone there, but every week people showed up, sat down, and made space for one more person. Someone would always say, "Pull up a seat." Week by week, strangers slowly became acquaintances, and some of those acquaintances became friends. Reminds me of another saying I like: a stranger might just be a friend you haven't yet met. As it turns out, a board game table is a surprisingly good place to build social skills. Games help create structure for interaction. There are rules, a shared goal, and low stakes. After all, it's only a game. That structure makes interaction easier. It becomes easier to talk, easier to cooperate, easier to compete, and easier to get to know one another. Games also give us a safe place to practice our emotional skills. How we deal with frustration, how we handle conflict, how we remain composed instead of gloating about our victory. When I lose a board game, do I flip the board game and send pieces flying across the room? Or do I shake hands and say, "Good game"? Sometimes a moment during the game triggers something in us and gives us some new insight to reflect upon. Sometimes there's what my husband calls in-game angry. You feel very angry as a result of some action or behavior, but you get to experience that anger inside the safe container of a game, which actually makes it a great place to practice expressing emotions in healthier ways, and maybe see some parallels between the things that anger us in the real world. Looking back now, the way I slowly started building friendships through those board game nights actually followed a pattern, what I now call the 4 R's. I'd like to share these now with you and hear what you think. So, the 4 R's consist of reparent, reach out, reflect, and repeat. I don't think of these as rigid steps, but more like phases in a natural process, discovered through experience. The first R stands for reparent, learning to care for ourselves and regulate our nervous system. Sometimes reparenting looked very simple. If I wanted to show up to board game night, I had to shower, get dressed, and make a plan for supper. And if the day had been particularly draining or stressful, I would sometimes watch a show for a little while first, just to calm down. Small things, but important acts of self-care. Reparenting involves learning to care for ourselves in the way a good enough parent would care for a child. In other words, it involves becoming our own good enough parent. So this first R is how we soothe our inner child and bring our body-minds into a state of more balance. It might be done through therapy, reflection, mindfulness, or simply meeting basic needs: sleep, healthy food, hygiene. Reparenting is also about developing the emotional skills that help relationships grow, learning to listen carefully, learning to express our feelings in a healthy and respectful way, learning to navigate disagreements and misunderstandings. In many ways, it's about becoming the kind of person others feel safe connecting with. Not perfect, just good enough. And something I've noticed on this journey is that before we can step outside our comfort zone, we first need to be in our comfort zone. If we're exhausted, overwhelmed, or dysregulated, reaching out to others can feel almost impossible. But when we take the time to care for ourselves and return to balance, then taking that small social risk becomes much easier. Part of reparenting is learning to take care of your own mental health. It's about making space for yourself so that you can be fully present for others. And that can make the next R easier. Reaching out. The second R is to reach out, to get ourselves out there and open ourselves up to social interaction. It involves a measure of vulnerability, to take a social risk. With people I met at the board game night, with whom I had really hit it off, I did the vulnerable thing. I shared my phone number. One of those people, with whom I exchanged info, invited me to play chess in a mall food court. That person later became my best friend. Years later, when I moved again, I started a board game group of my own. Now it was my turn to reach out to members in my neighborhood. It was my turn to say, pull up a seat. Meaningful connection requires some amount of vulnerability, letting ourselves be seen as we are, including our struggles and imperfections. Reaching out doesn't need to be complicated. Just sending a message to say hello and to start the conversation can count too. Fred Rogers once said, "There isn't anyone among us, not anyone, who hasn't had loss in our life. So, consequently, we can be in relationship with other human beings." Loss is something we all go through. It's part of being human, something we can all relate to. And what I think he's hinting at here is that trust in relationships often grows because of shared vulnerability. I like to imagine it as a bridge built through shared vulnerability, through a shared understanding that comes from when we open up about moments of grief, loss, and suffering. That understanding can become the pathway to deeper connection. In many cases, it's how we find our people. As Fred Rogers also once said, it's easier to go through difficult moments with people you love. When we suffer, such as experiencing loss, it can bring us closer to others who are also suffering. And in those moments, we naturally turn toward the trustworthy people in our tribe. It's the stress itself that nudges us to reach out and connect. At the same time, remembering what it feels like to suffer can make us more compassionate, more nurturing, more kind toward the people we meet who are also suffering. And I would add that one of the most beautiful aspects of love is acceptance. That we can be aware of someone's struggles, their weaknesses, and still accept them, still love them, warts and all. Our love becomes deeper because it includes all sides of a person. And vulnerability is what allows us to show those sides. It can open us up to this richer form of love. But as we all know, vulnerability can be hard. It opens us up not only to acceptance, but also to rejection and judgment. Overall, I think it's still worth a try. But what if reaching out feels extremely difficult? You freeze or you panic at the idea of talking to strangers. Well, then, you might want to consider first reaching out to a counselor or another mental health professional. I know that can feel scary, but there are people trained to help us work through those obstacles. And beyond one-on-one connection, I can't overstate the importance of expanding our social circles. Stepping outside our comfort zone to embrace new groups, like a church group or a community garden, it's not just beneficial. Research has proven its effectiveness against depression by fostering a sense of belonging and protecting against future episodes. For me, things like karate class, a public speaking club, and my board game group have been transformative. They've improved my confidence, my mental health, and given me a real sense of community. And they've led me to some of the most meaningful relationships in my life. So, if you're feeling hesitant about reaching out to a new group or hobby club, consider this a gentle nudge to take the plunge. It's an opportunity to enrich your life with meaningful connections and, hopefully, a deeper sense of fulfillment. The third R is to reflect. After many board game nights, I would reflect on the bus ride home. What emotions came up tonight? Was I really listening? Why was I so competitive? Why did I get so sweaty? Reflection helped me notice patterns in how I relate to others. Not always comfortable ones, but important ones. Reflecting requires us to access our adult brain, the prefrontal cortex. And that's much easier to do when we're first regulated. Over time, I found that reflection helps in two important ways when it comes to finding your people. First, it helps us understand ourselves. We start to notice our patterns, how we show up in conversations, how we handle conflict, how we listen or don't listen. And sometimes we come face to face with parts of ourselves that are still developing. I remember realizing in my 20s that I wasn't the best friend I could be. That was a hard pill to swallow. I had to learn to be less self-centered, to really listen, to understand that relationships are a two-way street. And that kind of awareness matters, because finding your people isn't just about finding the right people. It's also about becoming someone others can feel safe with. Someone who can listen, who can repair, who can grow. The second way reflection helps is that it helps us to understand our relationships. How do the people in your life make you feel? Do they build you up or leave you feeling drained? That question alone can tell you a lot about whether someone belongs in your tribe. because not everyone is meant to meet every need. And this becomes really clear when you start to map it out. If you've ever used something like a social support table, it shows you this in a very concrete way. I'll include a link in the transcript if you want to try it out. But even without a tool, you can start here. Who do you go to when you need a heart-to-heart? Who do you trust with your deepest thoughts and fears? Who helps you learn and grow? Who's your go-to for fun and laughs? And who makes you feel safe and secure? When you really sit with those questions, you start to see something. That different people meet different needs. And that's not a flaw in your relationships. It's actually how healthy relationships work. Sometimes reflection shows us where we want to invest more. Sometimes it shows us where we need to set better boundaries. And sometimes it shows us where there's space to find new people. Now, I'd like to invite you into a short reflection inspired by Mr. Rogers. He once said, "All of us have special ones who have loved us into being." So take a moment to think of the people who have helped shape who you are. Whomever you thought of, how pleased they must be to know the difference they've made. Sometimes when we feel lonely, we forget that we have been loved. Remembering those people can reconnect us to that feeling, that sense of being cared for. And from that place, it becomes a little easier to reach out. Because reflection isn't just about looking inward, it's about learning how to recognize, how to choose, and how to build relationships that are mutual, supportive, and real. Now, maintaining strong relationships also requires regular connection, leading us to the next strategy for nurturing your social circle. The fourth R is repeat. Connection grows through consistency. I went to that board game group every week, even when I didn't feel like it. Over time, something interesting happened. I started looking forward to it. Repetition has strengthened other relationships too. When my best friend moved to another city, we penciled in weekly hangouts every Wednesday. Sometimes a phone call, sometimes a video chat, sometimes we play a board game online together. We even gave it a nickname, TGIW. Thank goodness it's Wednesday. And suddenly, Wednesday became a day I actually looked forward to. I recognize that doing something weekly might not be feasible for everyone, so go as often as you can. Bi-weekly works too. Just repeat it often enough. Mr. Rogers would start every day replying to his fan mail and calling people he cared about. He built connection into his daily routine. If you have 10 minutes to doom scroll, maybe use those 10 minutes to reach out to someone you care about. A small habit like that can go a long way. I hope to get better at it myself. Trust grows slowly. through small acts of connection repeated over time. Keeping in touch is both simple and profoundly impactful. It's about making intentional efforts to engage with the people we care about, beyond likes or quick texts. By integrating regular catch-ups into our routine, we can cultivate relationships that can sustain us through life's ups and downs. Inspired by the wisdom that the best time to make friends is before you need them, we can start to build reaching out into our daily lives so that when support is needed, it's already there. So here's a gentle call to action. Start small, pick one person who matters to you, and set a regular time to connect. Because those routine interactions can become the foundation of something deeper, enduring, meaningful. Whether that looks like attending a club or group that meets regularly, or simply repeating the other R's, reparenting ourselves, reaching out, and reflecting until those two become habits. Because over time, that's how connection grows. That's how trust is built. And that's how we find our people. To close, finding your people is rarely one big moment. It's a practice. Small moments of connection repeated over time. When we work on regulating ourselves through reparenting, when we reach out to others and take steps to connect or join something, when we reflect on our relationships and build self-awareness, and when we repeat those efforts, making connection a habit, we begin to build a stronger tribe. So, wherever you are in your journey, consider this your invitation, because a stranger might just be a friend you haven't met yet. Pull up a seat. Thank you for being here. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear what's helped you find or nurture your tribe. Feel free to leave a comment or email us at reparentingpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.